Hey guys, it's Libby, and today I'm going to tell you about the books that I read in September and the books that I'm planning to read in October, also for Yallfest. So in September, I read three books. Impressive, I know. And this is actually the first time all year that I have been behind in my Goodreads goal. I was actually 2 books behind at one point. You may have noticed that I'm posting this like a week into October, and so I have caught up with that, but we're just going to pretend that the last week hasn't happened for the purposes of this video. So the first 2 books that I read, I actually read concurrently. I read Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel in the physical form, and then I listened to The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey in audiobook form, and my cat found a fortune cookie wrapper and is having a lot of fun with that. So if you see me looking over or you hear the crinkly sounds, you know why. And I didn't intend... There it goes. Don't choke on that, Nova. I didn't intend for this to be the case, but Station 11 and Girl with All the Gifts are actually quite similar stories. They both take place in a world slightly in our future when some biological agent has wiped out like 95% of humanity. But I didn't have as much trouble keeping them straight as one might suspect, possibly because I was hearing The Girl with All the Gifts in the voice of the narrator, and I was hearing Station 11 in my own head voice. But they also had distinctly different scopes. Station 11 is about multiple people. We jump around in time a lot, so we spend some time before the natural catastrophe that kills most people, and then sometimes after, whereas The Girl with All the Gifts is told linearly and has a really tight cast. I also rated both of them 4 out of 5, not because there was anything wrong with them. They both had a lot of good things. I enjoyed reading them, but they just didn't have a wow factor. And in Station 11, that's pretty understandable. It's meant to be maybe not gentle, but relatively calm despite all of the drama. There's sort of one storyline that gets introduced like 2/3, 3/4 of the way through that has some suspense involved, but it's more description, and the intrigue of the plot comes from figuring out the ties that connect all of these different times together. And you can only get but so excited about, oh my god, it's the same paperweight! What? The Girl with All the Gifts, on the other hand, did have a lot of big action scenes. But since at least once you get to about halfway through the book, we have such a small number of characters to work with, you kind of lose the suspense that any of them are going to die, because it's like, well, we got 5 people. Can only lose but so many of them before we stop having a story. Also, I had a kind of personal problem with The Girl with All the Gifts that I don't think many readers have. I'm going to be as vague as possible because the whole point of the beginning of this novel is that you don't really know what's happening. But there's sort of 2 different worldviews being presented, one of them by Helen Justineau and one of them by Dr. Caldwell. And I feel like you're supposed to side with Miss Justineau, but I don't. Excuse me for having the genetically determined desire to want the human race to continue. I find this very important, and if I have to be kind of mean to some children, okay. So yeah, I'm on Team Caldwell, and because of this, I really didn't like the ending. Not from a narrative structure. I think that, you know, it made sense, it was interesting, it was unexpected, but just like if that was the world that I had to live in, I would be severely unhappy. I'm not okay with the solution to the problem that we came up with. So anyway, I think most people will like The Girl with All the Gifts more than I did, and I think most people will also like Station 11. The next book that I read was Witches Abroad by Terry Pratchett, the next book in the Discworld series. Trudging right along, guys. Tortoise rather than hare. This is actually one of the few Discworld books that is spoilable, I think. And I had read this several years ago, so I already knew about the Lilith situation, we'll call it to keep things as vague as possible. So this book has a sort of, it's not a mystery, but it has a secret sort of woven throughout until you get like 2/3 of the way through. So I can't talk about it as much as I can talk about most of the Discworld books. But this is about the witches. The set we are working with at the moment is Magrat, which is how I pronounce her name. I understand different people pronounce it differently, and it works a lot better if you have a British accent, since it's a misspelling of Margaret. Nanny Og and Granny Weatherwax. And Magrat has become the fairy godmother to some girl over in Genua, which is a weird city-state. It's kind of fairy tale castle in the Louisiana bayou. And so Magrat has to go fairy godmother this girl. Of course, fairy godmothers come in pairs, the good one and the bad one, and Magrat has to figure out which one she is. And the other two older witches are certainly willing to meddle in this situation. So in this book we are exploring fairy tales and how fairy tales and real life can mesh or not mesh. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And now moving on to my October TBR. My TBR for this month is kind of dominated by the fact that I'm going to Yallfest, which is like the second weekend in November. And so there are some books that I want to read by authors who are going to be there so that I will be fully prepared and informed to have enlightened conversations with them. So the first author that I'm excited about is Gail Carriger. She has written the Parasol Protectorate series as well as the Finishing School series, which is a spin-off, and then another spin-off duology. Prudence Imprudence is, I think, what we're calling it. But this is Solace, the first book in the Parasol Protectorate series. And I've actually already read it. I just finished it yesterday. And this will be getting a full review. Well, review and ramble about how uncomfortable it is to be reading sex scenes in front of 15-year-olds. Not to the 15-year-olds, just in the same room. Lemony Snicket, aka Daniel Handler, will also be there. Oh my god. There is a chance that I will just burst into tears when I start talking to him. Please God, no. But he has written the series of unfortunate events, and the most recent book he wrote is the concluding tome in his series, what's it called? All the Wrong Questions. So the book that just got published is Why Is This Night Different from All Other Nights? This one that I'm holding here is Shouldn't You Be in School, which is the third in the quartet. I haven't bought Why Is This Night Different from All Other Nights yet, but I really want to. Although, we really did not get a satisfying conclusion to this series of unfortunate events in the last book of that series. So I'm kind of expecting that we won't really get a satisfying conclusion to the All the Wrong Questions series. But maybe, since this is a prequel series, maybe we will get like a satisfying conclusion to the series of unfortunate events in the conclusion of All the Wrong Questions. And then he'll write a new series that, I don't know, but please, tell me what VFD is, Lemony Snicket. Tell me how it works. Anyway, chillaxing for a second. Leigh Bardugo is also going to be there, and so I want to read Shadow and Bone and Siege and Storm, which are the two books of hers that I own. These are fairly well known, so I don't think I really have to tell you about them. It's a YA adventure love triangle situation in not Russia. And then finally, Mercedes Lackey is going to be there. She is a big high fantasy author, most famous for her Valdemar series, which is like a whole complicated situation of books that I can't keep track of. I've never read any Mercedes Lackey before, and I hadn't been particularly interested until I found out that I was going to have the chance to meet her. But my mom is a big Mercedes Lackey fan, so she has lent me a couple of books. I have the Fire Rose, the Fairy Godmother, and Burning Brightly. This is a Valdemar book. The other two are her fairy tale retelling books. And I think I'm going to be reading The Fire Rose, at least in preparation for Yallfest, and then if I have time / I'm really interested, I'll try the other two. I don't know what this book is about. I'm gonna read the back. Okay, you've got to hear this. Heiress Rosalind Hawkins was a thoroughly modern medieval scholar, her road through life well planned and already embarked upon. By breaking new ground in the groves of academe, she would show the world that brains and creativity trumped gender prejudice every time. Well, good for you, Rosalind. And make a name for herself in the process. But when her family fortune suddenly disappeared in a cloud of debt and recrimination, Rosalind was forced to the traditional haven of a previously well-to-do woman fallen on hard times. She accepted employment as a governess. Oh dear. She wasn't quite sure how the job, perhaps the only governess position ever that required skill in medieval French. I speak medieval French. Oh, this book is awesome. Mort est Rolands, Deus en ad l'anmest ciel, li empereur en rancevals parvient, où est vous, belles nièces, où est Gascogne, etc., etc. Anyway, she wasn't sure how the job had come her way, but she did know that it would pay her several times more than she had expected to be able to earn. But when she arrives at her employer's mansion overlooking San Francisco Bay, Rosalind discovers that she is to be a governess in a house without children or even a wife, and with only a single servant to keep the huge old house as immaculate as it is somehow kept. Furthermore, it seemed that she was never to meet her employer face to face, but merely to read to him through a speaking tube from ancient manuscripts in obscure and foreign dialects. Still, if she persevered, she might be able to resume her chosen life path a decade earlier than would otherwise be the case. As time passes, governess and employer learn first respect and then affection for each other. Aww. At last, they do meet face to face, and Rosalind learns Jason Cameron's terrible secret. Is it that he has a wolf head? No. And despite or because of it, she comes to love him and the earth moves. You totally gave away the whole story, back cover text. Do I even have to read the book now? Yes, this sounds awesome. There better be actual medieval French in here. Oh, and then honorable mention to Libba Bray. I was interested in her books. I hadn't read any of them yet, and she was going to be at Yallfest. So I got the audiobook of A Great and Terrible Beauty, and I tried listening to it, and I just did not care for it. There seemed to be some fairly foundational misunderstandings of how Victorian society works, and I was listening to it at the same time I was reading Soulless, which is like deliberately silly, and this more accurately captured Victorian society than did the fantasy but relatively straightforward Victorian society in that book. So let me know if Great and Terrible Beauty gets a lot better after chapter 4 or something, or if Libba Bray's other books are better. But right now, Great and Terrible Beauty is in my DNF pile, and I'm not planning to read any other works by Libba Bray, which is sad because it seemed like there was possibility there. And then the next book on my October TBR you will already be familiar with if you are following me on Twitter. And if you're not following me on Twitter, I am personally offended. Links in the doobly-doo. It is Killing Adonis by J.M. Donnellan. This book, like, apparently no one's ever heard of it. I had never heard of it until I watched Little Book Owl's most recent video in which she mentioned it. I think you can only get a physical copy in Australia, so I got the ebook, which I guess is a good thing because it means I could have it immediately. Because I pretty much watched her video, said, oh, that Killing Adonis book looks kind of interesting, went onto Amazon, read the preview, I was like, oh my god, this is amazing, Freya is amazing. I need to read this book now. So although I have several other things I need to be doing today, I'm mostly just reading that book. I'm editing this video and I'm reading that book, and that's my day. And then last of all, I'm feeling a Shakespeare binge coming on, which is sad because I'm already reading another really good book and now I feel the call for Shakespeare to be in my life, but that is a call that I must heed. So earlier today I was listening to Slate's Culture Gabfest podcast, which is a podcast that I really like. I will provide a link to the latest episode down there, where the final segment they talk about whether Hamlet is fat or not. And this made me want to go reread Hamlet, and then Henry IV Part 1 and Winter's Tale, slightly more obscure ones, had been on the brain for various other reasons, and I was like, yeah, I'd maybe like to read those too. So It's going to be a lot of Shakespeare going down the next couple of days. Anyway, that is my belated monthly update. I hope you guys are all having a lovely day, and I will see you in another video in a couple of days, hopefully, or IRL at Yallfest if you're going to be there. Come say hi.